Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get us started because we have a full agenda. We are going to make very good use of this hour, and I'll keep letting folks in as they join us. But I'm Bobbie Laur. I'm the president of Campus Compact. I'm so excited to have you with us today on this lovely May afternoon, at least here in Baltimore. It is lovely, and Gia is right down the street from me, which is rare to be on webinars with people right down the street. And today is session 4 of the series that Campus Compact is doing that is focused on resource cultivation and thinking about how we expand, particularly externally facing resources to advance civic and community engagement. And we're looking at it through this series through a variety of pathways. And so far we have looked at endowed centers and institutes and the role that endowments can play in our work. And then we've also looked at more programmatic investments, so professorship programs and student fellowship programs. And today we're going to talk about earmarks, which I know Bill is going to talk to us about, is not necessarily the official wording when we get to Bill, but I think we all kind of commonly refer to them lovingly as earmarks. And I'm excited to have with us 2 institutions that have been successful in garnering these federal resources, and in some cases also some state resources to advance civic and community engagement. And what's particularly exciting is I think Nyeema and Gia are going to really represent 2 different kinds of approaches and also what the work can support in terms of 2 different projects. So the way that today is going to work is that we're going to have both Nyeema and Gia, who I'll introduce in just a second, highlight their individual institutions. They're going to talk to you about a little bit about their role and how their work is structured on their campus, but then also really dive into what are these resources that they have been able to successfully garner at the federal level. What are they going to support? What was the process in getting there? And a little bit of shared learnings of what were some of the lessons learned that they're also in the thick of, I will name. So I want to give both Nyeema and Gia credit for coming on here today when they are both actively figuring out how to spend down these dollars, utilize them, work with their liaisons and folks on their campuses. And then I'm excited to have Bill Bates with us from Washington Navigators, which is one of a lucky partner of Campus Compact, who's going to talk to you broadly to lay out the landscape and talk about this work, but also give us a sense of what's to come, particularly right now in the political landscape and in Congress, what we can expect next year as you can maybe think about how to move this forward. And then we will close with some group conversations. So start thinking about your questions. We will make sure to get to them. So with that, I want to start with Nyeema Watson from Rutgers-Camden. And Nyeema has a new title that I do not have sitting in front of me. So Nyeema, I'm going to try to remember. I believe she is the Senior Vice Chancellor for Strategy, Diversity, and Community Engagement.
Perfect.
Nailed it. Okay, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Bobbie, and thanks for everyone for showing up today. And shout out to some of my team who's here, Daniel, Tomei, and Tanisha Bass. Thanks for being here for the support. And they too can hear like how the sausage gets made with all of this. And one of these lessons learned is that sometimes we do this work on such a high level, and then we tell our teams like, hey, we got this money. And they're like, huh? Or wasn't this money we talked about like 2 years ago? Yes, it was, but it finally has come through. So let me share my screen. So I want to share a little bit about who we are. So Rutgers University-Camden, we're located in Camden, New Jersey. We're part of the state system, Rutgers, the state institution, the State University of New Jersey, and we're 5 minutes away from Philadelphia. We're at the base of the Ben Franklin Bridge on the New Jersey side, and that's 2 of our lovely students on the bridge right now. In that photo, we serve about 6,500 students. 90% of our students are commuters, so we're a heavily commuter campus. Close to 50% of our students are Pell eligible. And last year, we became a minority serving institution, and you can see our demographics there now. And this is something that we are really proud of because the core of Rutgers-Camden is about access and opportunity. So over the past few years, we really have been changing our financial model on how do we make sure that anyone who wants access to a Rutgers education can have it. So some people may be on the call who know the work of Rutgers-Camden and our civic engagement work, but I want to talk about laying the context of our work before we get into the presentation about the earmarks, that we were founded as an Office of Civic Engagement in 2009, 2010, and did all of the traditional things that offices of civic engagement do with K-12 outreach programs, faculty development programs around service learning, deep student engagement in terms of being a part of the Bonner Civic Scholars programs and other ways to raise up students who are community leaders. But in the I'm not even going to say even in the aftermath of George Floyd, but even prior to that, we were thinking about what does our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives on the Rutgers-Camden campus mean, and how are they situated in relation to our civic engagement work? And so with some conversation prior to COVID, during COVID, definitely after George Floyd, we made a transition as a campus, moving our work simply from being civic engagement to being DICE, which is the Division of Diversity and Inclusion in Civic Engagement. And we root our work in this theoretical framing that one of our colleagues, Tim Eatman, was a part of, that talks about this concept of full participation. We started to lean into the idea that as universities, as anchor institutions, we're not only accountable to those who are on our campus, but we're accountable to those in close proximity of our campus. So we're accountable to the residents of the city of Camden. And so this concept of full participation asks you to look at how are you thinking about your civic engagement work and your community engagement work in relation to issues of equity, access, and inclusive practices. And so we made this switch in 2020, moving from civic engagement to DICE, and really moving forward with this new vision of our work, tying both civic engagement and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so if people have thoughts about that, I'm certainly happy to talk about them later. And so this is just a representation of how we pull all of our work together now with diversity, equity, and inclusion in the center of our engagement work, our inclusive excellence in teaching and research, inclusive campus culture, and thinking about how we recruit and retain a diverse community. Our civic engagement work is really steeped in these program areas that I list below. Our anchor strategies, which is focused on local procurement, local hiring, what do we think of, and how do we think about how we build and expand the physical nature of our campus. Our biggest portfolio of work is in K-12 partnerships, and so thinking about after-school programs, college access programs. We've created an educational pipeline for students in grades 3 through 12, and then try to support those students to and through college. A whole host of community partners, critical service learning, leaning on the work of Nyeema Mitchell, that we're trying to address root causes in our engaged civic learning courses and not just simply surface level work. Looking at student volunteerism and engagement, publicly engaged scholarship is an area that we focus on, and I'll talk about that more with our earmarks and our community advisory board. So getting into this earmark work, we are one university, but we are several campuses. And so our budget comes from the state. The budget for Rutgers University comes from the state of New Jersey. However, each campus is allowed to engage with their local elected officials around areas of interest specific to the campus. And so the way the process works, applications become available for congressionally directed spending, earmarks, as we call them, and then we submit our ideas as a campus from our campus to our president, and then our president decides which of these ideas moves forward. So the first earmark congressionally directed spending we were able to get was in March 2021, and that was really in response to COVID. We were asked as a university, how are you aiming to respond to COVID? What can you do to respond to COVID? So we put up an idea for a program called RAH, the Rutgers Accelerate and Renew Academy, which is focused on how do we work with students in elementary, middle, and high schools as they're coming back from COVID, and getting them support for social emotional skills, near peer mentoring, and academic skill building through tutoring and mentoring. As you can see, we applied for this in March 2021. We didn't get it. We didn't hear about it until April 2022, and it was in the amount of $234. When we applied for it, it was a rather short application. It's like a paragraph or two. What do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? What impact is this going to have on your congressional district in the state of New Jersey? But then after we receive the money, and you'll hear me say this repeatedly, then we have to submit a full application to the U.S. Department of Education. So this was something that I wasn't aware of. I was like, oh, I did the work. I created this idea. I submitted this one page to our congressional office, and then we get this, email that we've gotten this award, and then they're like, now, but now you need to create a full application of it as an accountability measure, a check and balance to make sure that you're using the money that the way you intended to use it. And so now we have this fund, we're able to use this money. Originally, it was from 2022 to 2023, but we've also gotten it extended to 2024 because, as we'll talk about, sometimes getting these programs up and running quickly is a challenge. The second earmark that we received, and we just recently received, is to expand our work in the city of Camden, expand our civic engagement work off the campus and into community centers in the neighborhood in the city of Camden. Again, this was a pie in the sky idea that we had talking to the chancellor, but when the applications came around again, he said, what's a new idea that you want to put forward? We did. As you can see, the timeline of this, February 2022, we conceptualize the idea. We fill out, again, this kind of one-page document. And in February 2023, we get alerted that we received $1.4 million. And then we have to write an application for that funding. And so we just recently finished that application in April. It'll be a 3-year project. And it really will be focused on thinking about what are the unique things we have as an institution of higher education and how can we push those into the neighborhood community centers. While all of this was going on, we had also been asking to get support in our state budget. And I list here, if you look at this slide, and I'll go out of order, we started asking for state budget support for our civic engagement work. Same process, we give this to our president. The president allows us to move forward with asking for this on behalf of the campus. But we have been working on this since 2018. 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and apparently in 2022, they finally agreed and it hit. And so we were able to get some funding to expand our civic engagement work. So this is funding in the state budget for $2 million. And for all of these requests, what we really had to do was just engage deeply with our elected officials. We had to talk to them on the phone constantly. We had to let them know about our work. We had to not take no for an answer, but it really was about building relationships. Here I have listed the projects that we have to support this money. A lot of this will be seed money for initiatives. So for publicly engaged scholarship, we have an urban innovation fund where we're putting about $400,000 into this work, but we also really are using this funding to expand everything that we've done. Now we're in the middle of another budget process, trying to seek additional funding. Let's see if we get it for this fiscal year coming up to expand our college access work, our student civic engagement, and our publicly engaged scholarship. So things to know. Hurry up and wait. Hurry up and wait. These processes take a really long time. So I put the timelines there so you could see that we started a year prior. And so you really can't bank on this money coming quickly. This money is short term. So while it's great to get it, it's great to get $1.4 million, we only have that funding over 3 years. And so when that money goes away, I don't know if we're ever going to get that money back again. So you have to think about sustainability of your projects while you're doing this. Build relationships with elected officials. We are constantly with a group called Friends of Rutgers. These are all of our elected officials in the entire state of New Jersey and influencers in the Delaware Valley region. We let them know everything we're doing all the time, so that when we have a request that we want to put in, they understand some of the work that we're doing, but also we stay connected with our federal relations colleagues here on campus and those down in Washington, D.C. So when we put these earmarks in, or we put these requests in for our budgets, we actually have the opportunity to talk to our elected officials who will have the ability to either put your spending proposal up for a vote or to support that spending proposal that's been put up from somebody else. So constant communication with them, talking to them right now during budget season. I have about 6 meetings lined up, and then just continuing to make sure they understand who you are and what you do has been critical to the process. And that's it.
That was right on time. Okay, so I'm already thinking about one question, Nyeema, I'd love for you to just take a noodle on, which is what you just said, which is like, you're like, I got 6 meetings planned coming up. I think it'd be great for folks to think about how you think about how to structure that ask. Like, you've learned a lot, you know, in the 5 years you've kind of been in this more federal relations game. Like, how do you think about which projects are the right fit for like what kinds of federal resources in terms of short-term or long-term? Okay, so next up, we're flowing right along on time, is Gia Grier McGinnis, and Gia is the executive director of Loyola's Center for Community Service and Justice and the York Road Initiative at Loyola University, Maryland.
So hi, everyone. Gia Grier McGinnis. I'm at Loyola University, Maryland. We are a small liberal arts Jesuit Catholic university in Baltimore, Maryland. So a lot of people think that Earmark funding is only for public universities. So if you're a private university, you certainly can also pursue Earmark funding. And CCSJ, as we call it, our mission is connecting campus and community for a just and equitable world. And we do this through a wide variety of means. We consider ourselves a justice anchor institution. We're grounded in our Jesuit mission and identity, rooted in values such as service, justice, diversity, and leadership. We actually just recently are aligned with our mission division. The mission division is charged with infusing those Jesuit values across the university. And we're kind of considered the mission in action for Loyola. So we're really at the heart of what Loyola is all about. And in terms of our approach, we see our partnerships as reciprocal, place-based, and asset-based. And we have a commitment to anti-racism and racial justice. We are a one-stop shop for community engagement. So I have a full-time team of 10 that's all under the same center, which makes for interesting work. We're constantly churning here at CCSJ. And so we do anything from working with faculty and students on community engaged learning and scholarship. We have a student intern program. They serve as our service and volunteerism coordinators. We do work with legislative advocacy and civic engagement, but we also have global and domestic immersions. We're actually rebuilding our global program now post-pandemic. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be talking with you about our place-based initiative called the York Road Initiative, which is Loyola's commitment to the neighborhoods surrounding a 2-mile stretch of commercial corridor in North Baltimore. And so here's just a map of our catchment area. So the vertical line down the middle is York Road. So that's the 2-mile stretch of road. And the community is divided into east and west sides of the road. The east side being more under-resourced, more racially and ethnically diverse, whereas the west side tends to have wealthier neighborhoods, but not just limited to that, but that's the predominant community. Our campus is on the west side, but we also have a satellite office for our York Road Initiative, which is right in the heart of the corridor, centrally located. It's where we stage our farmers market and other events throughout the year. So in terms of our Earmark Award, we were awarded $675,000 with a grant period of August to August. So we are in the thick of it. Like, yes, we are. The weather is warm and projects are churning because a lot of them are weather dependent. We requested the funds in January of 2022 through our senator's office, and our government relations team really runs the front end of our process. They have those ongoing relationships with our elected officials. They really just tap us for the project ideas, and they basically have the meetings with our delegation to explain what those projects are. They also have a relationship with Thorn Run Partners. This is a consulting firm, and it's really because a lot of their relationships are with education staffers. When our Earmark request was being developed, it realized they were drifting into kind of the commercial sphere. And so they leveraged the relationships of the consulting firm to make inroads much faster. Our federal partner is the Small Business Administration. They're very flexible and easy to work with. I was very surprised how, easy they are to talk to. They answer questions right away. Been really pleased working with them. In terms of our project concepts, if there's one word I would use to describe the earmark process, it's fast. Everything is fast. So the government relations team emerged. They needed that blurb, that short paragraph, and they needed it very quickly because the application will be on the elected official's website for you to fill out. There's a window of opportunity where you can apply for that, and the sooner the better to get your request in, because everyone is putting in requests. Like, you're not the only person. Other universities are putting in requests, so other constituencies. So your electeds are actually looking at a big pot of requests from lots of people. And one thing that's unique about the Maryland delegation is they'll meet together. The electeds will actually sit down and look at their requests collectively to make sure there's no duplication and what's viable, what's not. In our case, we straddle 2 districts. Our York Road work is in one, and then the campus proper is in another. So those 2 have to talk to say, okay, are you putting it in? And so on. One thing we were advised is that the projects needed to be shovel ready. So do not tell us something that you may or may not do. Like, if you get this money, you have to execute it in a short period of time, and you need to be ready to execute. So don't think of something that, oh, it's not even like feasible. It has to be something like, you know, you're going to do it if you get the money. And our projects are a combination of enhancing our existing work, but also we pulled really heavily from past community conversations and documents. This community several years ago formed a collective around the corridor, and they actually pushed to get an urban development plan approved for the corridor. It's 90 something pages of lots of plans and documents. And so some of the earmark projects were kind of picked for feasibility and time sensitivity from this document and other plans. So now I'm just going to run through the various projects that are in the package. And some of these are very short-term projects that we can do in a few months. Others are much longer-term endeavors, taking the full year, or drifting into what's called our no-cost extension period, where you can ask for that extra year or 2 to execute. This first project is for our business improvement district. So this community, their commercial property owners voted to pass a business improvement district. Some people call them main streets. So if you live in a community that has a main street, it's very similar. The only difference is that those commercial property owners are taxed based on the parcel size that they own. And so it's kind of like a main street that has a guaranteed revenue stream based on tax income. And so the earmark money that went in is really just seed funding for it, because there is a bit of a gap. So there's a 6-month lag between when you get that tax money in. It's just, there's all this bureaucracy around the money. So it's just so they can get up and running. So funds are for a clean and green program. We have to stand up an office. So like, what do you need for an office? Printers, copiers, and things like that. And then there's an additional commercial package. So things like our small business facade improvement program. So the photos there are before and after of a project we executed this fall with one of our longstanding commercial business owners. We also have a consultant that works along the corridor on commercial code enforcement. This is an existing person, so it helped to enhance their work and give them more hours. And then we also have a small scale clean and green program with a local community partner that works with people with developmental disabilities. So they have a workforce program. So it used to be funded by a church group that would literally pass the hat every so often, and they would bring the cash into our office and we'd hold their money for them. So they're very excited when they got this extra influx of dollars, and that program will roll into the business improvement district when the tax money rolls in. And then we have some smaller scale projects. These are coming from that city approved plan. These are key intersections along our commercial corridor that just need enhancing physically. So that first picture is of the Iron Bird sculpture. It's like the first thing you see on the northern end of the corridor. So the property owner right now has plastic flowers shoved into the dirt, which is very Baltimore. So people do that in Baltimore. But we, want kind of real plants there, and the owner is excited to have some real landscaping there. And then the lower picture is a longer term project that we're wrapping into our no cost extension, which is to convert a pedestrian alley so that local school children can have a safe passage from the school to the library on the other end of the alleyway. And then we have some youth programming. We have an ongoing relationship with the Baltimore Office for the Promotion of the Arts. It's a summer workforce program where youth work with a community muralist and learn how to design and construct a mural. So those two pictures are of past projects, and we're launching this summer's project with BOPA pretty soon. We just recruited our youth for it. And then we also provided some small scale funding for partners along the corridor that wanted to do some one-time programming with their youth this summer. So we had a summer youth fund, and we just dispersed money to 4 partners for that. And this last category is our existing food and nutrition programs. So this was really what we considered enhancements to work we already do with our farmers market. So this summer we'll have some extra special events. We also launched a community fridge program this fall, which is kind of a no questions asked. The community come and take food out of the fridge, but also put, donations in. And so it helped give us some seed money for the produce and us that goes into the fridge. And that's it. There's my contact information, and look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Gia. Okay, so last up in terms of giving some overviews before we dive right into conversations is Bill Bates. Bill is one of the founding partners of Washington Navigators, and Bill is going to give us an overview of the broader kind of earmark landscape. And I think hopefully for some folks on this call, fill in some holes from kind of hearing about Gia and Nyeema, who have a depth of now experience in that space. So I'll turn it over to you, Bill.
Thanks, Bobbie. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see the screen. And what I'm going to do in just a few minutes is really try and generalize some of the specifics that you just heard about with relation to the federal earmark process. So just a real quick bit of history. The first earmark, so next time you're at a cocktail party and someone wants to talk about it, was the establishment of Washington, D.C. as our capital. If you saw the play Hamilton, you'll know that in the room where it happens was not a peer-reviewed process. That was an effort to grease the wheels of legislation, and putting Washington, D.C. as our capital was therefore, in many respects, the first earmark we saw. But it has a long and historic it is a long and historic tradition in our legislative process. Throughout the 1800s, it was really focused on traditional infrastructure, bring a road or a bridge home to your district. Over the years, there have been many efforts at reform. As control of the House or the Senate has switched, people have tried to limit the amount of earmarks, the legislation in which you could earmark. But really, up until about 2011, it was an expected and not terribly controversial, except in some circles, part of the legislative process. In 2011, that changed. For 10 years, we had no earmarking in Congress, and it really came to a head with a series of just bad decisions by members to push projects that they probably should not have. The infamous bridge to nowhere is the one I call out there, and that was a multi tens of millions of dollars targeted towards a bridge in Alaska to an island that had 12 people on it. It was one of those things that just sounded bad, and probably wasn't where the money should have gone at that time. So as a result, they banned them. But back in 2021, they came back to life. And as Bobbie hinted at the start, we now don't really call them earmarks. We call them community projects or congressionally directed spending. And the real big difference from the old way of doing it to the new way is there is a lot more transparency than there used to be. It's no longer the case that no one can kind of tell who supported the project, where did it come from, how did it get into the bill. It is, as both of our previous speakers have described, now a fairly structured process. Just to give you some sense of the scope, in the large omnibus bill that was passed at the end of last year, there were $15 billion of earmarks included. This year already, just in the House, over 5,000 earmarks have been requested, totaling over 19 billion. And this is despite the fact that when the Republicans took over the House, they added a host of new restrictions on the type of projects that could be requested, the accounts or the agencies that you could go to ask for those earmarks, one of them being the Department of Education, which was I think we saw a couple examples of earmarks that went there already. So that did change the dynamic, but it did not change the overall scope of the requests. So just a quick thoughts about, if you have an idea, if you have a project, is it earmark worthy? And just some thoughts there. Infrastructure is still the king of the earmark process. If you look at the list of 5,000 requests, the vast majority are infrastructure related: roads, bridges, sewage systems, streetscapes. It is, now having said that, very hard to get a brick and mortar earmark. And what I mean by that is to build yourself a new building. You can fix the road, you can repair the streetscape, you can replace signage, but starting from the ground up and rebuilding is typically not, except for a few exceptions, something that's done in the earmark process. The other thing to highlight is that words matter. If you look at a lot of the member sort of websites where they describe the project they're looking for, there's a lot of talk about modernization, enhancements, flood prevention, as opposed to, as I say here, asking for or to renovate your building or to solve climate change and things like that. So you have to be aware of the way you're describing your projects. The little anecdote I had included there was when I first came to DC, I worked with a public affairs firm that was known for their work in earmarks. And they had created the intermodal vehicle containment facility, which, if you think about it, is a parking garage next to a bus stop. So that was the sort of creativity that you can see in this process. But on the serious side of things, as you're thinking of this, the project, and we had multiple great examples just a moment ago, it has to impact the district and or the state of the person you are going to make the request to. It's just that's they want to know that if I back this, if this has my name associated with it, that this is something that I will be able to see on the ground with the people I represent. You are going to need support letters from the community. So this is a great time to be thinking about, if I'm putting a project together, is this just for me, or is this something that has an impact in the community with others, and are those potential partners that could be supportive of this effort? We've already heard a number of times about that you do have to be ready to go, but you also have to be patient, and that is very true. The legislative process is not a guaranteed timeline. Some years, if you ask in April, your money could be available in December. Some years it could be the following March or even June, depending on how the legislative process goes. And then finally here, you do have to be a nonprofit or government entity. No for-profit entities, companies can be requesters or recipients of earmarks. So real quick on just the process, and again, I'm just sort of summarizing some of what we heard. The first question to ask is, does my member actually partake in this process? Many members do not. For some, the earmark is some anathema to their political views, and they will not do it, regardless of whether you're in their district or what the project is. And that's true in both the House and Senate. The request has to be reasonable. Most earmarks are in the range of $250,000 to $2 million. Sometimes they can be larger, but that's really the range you should be thinking about. Documentation, we've heard a little bit about that. I just want to highlight that there is a big difference between what your member of Congress wants and what you should have. And the member of Congress has an online form. It can take you 15 minutes to fill out. But as we, both because if you do get that money, you're going to need to deal with the agency itself in a more comprehensive way. But you should also be thinking about, if I get this project that Congressman Smith is supporting, you want to have a strong and coherent answer to that question. And again, the House and the Senate somewhat depends on your delegation. The Maryland delegation sounds like a great setup, but a lot of states, there are members that support them, that support earmarks, and some that do not. And then I won't spend time on the can I have money now, as others have said. You'll get it eventually, but you have to be ready to go once it's there. And then finally, just a little bit on the civic and community engagement earmark specific. It's a lot harder this year than it was in previous years because we don't have access to the Labor, HHS, and Education Appropriations Bill, which funded a lot of these projects. One path to sort of get around that a little bit is linking it to other issues such as STEM, climate, streetscapes, community centers. Those are funded through different appropriations bills, and I mentioned a few of them there. Couple examples that I saw in the House requests already this year was a community STEM facility from the University of North Alabama, an advanced innovation facility in the University of Massachusetts, and in particularly the University of Massachusetts Lowell one. If you read the description, it is very focused on community outreach, engaging different stakeholders around the area and bringing them into the facility. So that's it. That's the hook that they went with there. And I'll wrap up there because I know we're tight on time. Happy to answer any questions and participate in the discussion. And thanks a lot for being here and inviting me. Bobbie, you're muted.
Sorry, I guess this is my first Zoom. Just figuring out how this technology works. Okay, so I have our panelists spotlighted here. I don't see any questions yet in chat. And you also, feel free to put your hand up if you want me to just go ahead and call on you or spotlight you to ask a question. But I have one to help us get started. I think, actually, I'll let John go ahead and jump in. So John from SUNY, you want to jump in, Cortland? I cannot hear you, unfortunately. Okay, give you a couple minutes. Okay, John's going to come back. Okay, we do have a couple questions coming in. So Samanti, I believe, interested in the issue of strategic language. How can we straddle the line between something that might seem partisan, but is actually fully within the rubric of civic engagement? Anybody have an immediate kind of reflection to that?
I mean, I'll just real quick, since I brought up the issue of words. Yeah, it's a good point. And, some of the restrictions that were put in place by the new Republican majority did specifically get at those issues where they did not want to see projects that had that specifically targeted things like climate change or, critical race theory, things like that. So you do have to be aware of that and, who your audience is. And some of that will also be a give and take that you can participate in with the member of Congress who's going to support your request. They're not trying to play got you here. This is a collaboration with them. So there's nothing wrong with sort of setting up a meeting, going in and sitting down with the staff and sort of saying, here's what we're thinking. And here's how this project may play out. And they'll tell you, oh, you know what, this part of it makes perfect sense. My boss is not going to be comfortable, saying this, what you did, this part of the project. So let's focus it here. And it can be a collaboration to sort of get you to where they're comfortable being supportive.
And it's a conversation. So I know we like jam through like all of the information, but when the portal was open, and I think it depends on your university. So when the portal opens, again, for Rutgers, our chancellor is told the portal is open. The president's office says, Rutgers-Camden, get your projects in order. So we develop our projects. We have internal people who help us with the language. Then it goes to the president's office. Then the president's office may play with the language if your project is chosen. Then it goes to our federal relations team in DC, and then they will work on the language. And then we know, again, because we built these relationships with our electeds, as Bill was saying, we know what's going to set our congressman or woman off. We know the things that they're already interested in. So we built that in the beginning. Then it goes to them. And then they call us back. Okay, I just want to be clear, the aide, the chief of staff, as I'm saying this to X, Y, and Z, is this what you want? Do you really just want to have that in Camden City? Could you extend this out to another, township or district? Are you comfortable with that? That would, help us, because we always give money here, we want to give it elsewhere. So it's quick, it is very, very quick, but there is a lot of back and forth because you want to put up the thing, you want to put up the project that's going to get the most support from everybody, and there's not going to be any questions asked about it.
Yeah, I think I just want to add a couple things. One is that, Nyeema and Gia both, in an executive director role and then as a senior vice chancellor, are sitting at kind of a senior level leadership role at the organization. And I think one takeaway I want to have everybody on the call is, Nyeema is talking specifically within her campus, this very structured approach of how this comes down. The portal opens, there's a discussion, I'm guessing, particularly among probably the President's Council. But if you are sitting like as an associate director or a director of a center and you're thinking, I don't even know where this happens on my campus, one of the first steps is just start to try to understand that. And I think what hopefully you're hearing from Bill and from Gia and Nyeema is that this is happening at your campus. And so this is not unique to their institutions. It may look different in terms of the way the process works. And I thought it was so great to have a Jesuit private institution and then, a public coming from, in Nyeema's case. But I think that's a really important point to make, that don't get intimidated by saying, I don't know how this works, because it is happening. So it is about going back, I think, and hopefully this can inspire a first conversation of like, how can I participate? Or are there pathways for participation? I also want to name, I know, and it occurred to me sitting here that both Maryland and New Jersey, have been historically strongholds in terms of democratic states, but, earmarks are successful across the board. This is not something that, while kind of Bill outlaid challenges in 2011, largely, Bill, am I correct that this is something that absolutely can be advanced regardless of the kind of political landscape of your state? Right to say.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just as one slide showed, I mean, the requests already on the House side include more Republicans than the previous year. So yeah. And there are Democrats that don't want to request earmarks. So, I mean, it's really a member by member, senator by senator situation.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Okay, the next person asked, and I'd be curious to Gia if you have a thought on this, just because I know you guys do some collaborative work. Particularly with other institutions, but someone asked, does this need to be an individual school proposal, or have you thought about a collaborative approach that might be a kind of multi-institution?
And that I'm not sure of. Our partnerships are collaborative, so our letters of support we have a wide variety of letters that go in, but I'm not sure if people have submitted earmarks with multiple institutions.
That's a feeder.
Anybody else, Nyeema, are you aware? Is that anything you guys have done, or they've all really come just specifically from Camden?
We would not, probably, unless it was a university, unless it was an institution we already had a relationship with, because these things are used to support, like Rutgers institution writ large, to support the work that we have going on. So if we had a project where we were already partnering with another like institution of higher education, that may go forward, but this is to support the Rutgers.
And I would also think, because it goes through individual members, and Maryland does, like that delegation does get together, but if it's a university that's has a different rep and it's in a different geography, it might get tricky of like, okay, who submits and then which district, and so I'm not saying it's never happened, maybe it has, but I could see that being a complication.
I do believe, and I can't think of the exact example, but I would imagine that this has been historically supported, would be that another approach that an earmark could probably be appealing is if you have a multi-campus sort of place-based initiative that might be like multiple campuses come together for like expanding pathway programs, potentially for like a single school district. One of those institutions is going to have to take a lead and be the person that submits that earmark. But I think there would be a path forward where you have kind of a multi-anchor approach, but an institution is probably the actual submitter. I'm guessing is the way that would work. Okay, I think the next question we have here is from John, who was talking about how do you define and describe success? You know, I think something that's interesting that I appreciate about both years is there's such a diversity in terms of the types of projects, you know, in particular with the York Road Initiative, really like specific on those food insecurity, those corridor improvement zones. So those are pretty easy, right? I'm guessing to think about what are those metrics. But, you know, what else do you want to say about that, Gia, and then Nyeema, as well as how you're defining success?
Right. And I think it depends on, so for us, we have so many little projects, like a lot of them are stop, start, you know, oh, the planting happened, or, okay, we converted the pedestrian alley. I think it gets trickier with like our business improvement district, like we're going to be doing collective impact consulting planning soon for that. Like, what is success? You know, like we got it passed and we have money for it, but yeah, you do have to do the work of, okay, is it how many businesses we bring to the corridor? Is it, you know, the amount of trash the Clean and Green program picks up? So I think it's almost the same question you would ask as you do your regular community engagement work. Like there's nothing different about the fact that it's just earmark funded. You still have to develop your assessment metrics and as you would any of your community outreach programs.
I agree. And as we were thinking about, we had a call this week. And this is going back to Bobbie's questions, like what project is the right fit? The projects have to already be in your head. They have to already be in your head. You need to have already built these relationships. You have to already know what the community wants. So you also have to already know what you think success would be. Like how many increased number of students are going to be served? Do they have any, you know, demonstrable difference in their social emotional kind of learning and development, which is what we're doing with the COVID project, because so many of our young people need additional mental health support. For the community centers project that we're doing, you know, are we, you know, right now these community centers are not active. Have we activated them? Have we increased the number of hours they're open? Have we brought in new programming to them? Are more residents coming to them? And so as we were talking to our electeds about the state budget process of like re-asking for that funding, they're asking the same things. Tell me how many people in the district have been impacted. Tell me stories about students who've gotten XYZ, who wouldn't have gotten XYZ without this money. So they want to be able to go back, I think to Bill's point, and be able to show like there's some accountability, some transparency, like without this money, X number of kids would need the support. With this money, we've been able to do that. So they are asking us, and pretty quickly we were like, okay, like technically the money just got in our university account. Like I just finished working on the budget. They're like, how many kids have you seen so far? You know, how much programming have you done? None. Like you gotta give me, it took you 6 months to like go through the application process, but they want that same exact thing, but something that they can, you know, highlight for a check presentation, come by and shake some hands. Like they want to be able to see that, but you build it off of what you know is the right thing you should be building off of if you were gotten this money from like a foundation.
Bill, can I ask you, like, and jump in on this too, but another question I have is, you know, we've seen a public institution and a private institution. And I think, you know, one of the things we talked about in our small group is like, do you see any trends or data related to kind of the institutional type or success in terms of advancing earmarks?
No, I mean, I think that, you know, both are fully viable options. I don't think you should view yourself as I'm a private institution. I can't do this like the public can. I think it's there definitely opportunities in both areas. I think the one thing I wanted to jump in on in the previous, just because I sort of had realized I'd left it out of my talk, is, you know, the other thing you have to think about is these are not operations funds too. You know, when you're putting these projects and thinking about them, the temptation is to say, oh, great, I can hire 2 more people to run this program, which you can, as long as you have a plan in place for paying them after the earmark runs out, because most of these earmarks are a year or so in length. So it's really, you have to be careful about that and not try to set yourself up for a situation where suddenly you have an unfunded program in a year and a half or something like that.
What a great transition, Bill. Let's talk about, because with a little bit of time left, I think one of the always challenges is what's the other side of this? And so like, maybe Gia, let's start with you. You know, you talked about a lot of resources that are going back out into the community thanks to these funds. What is the plan of either managing expectations or just the sustainability of being able to do this after the grant?
Yeah, and I think some of the funding went to our existing work, so it's kind of like a great year where we have some extra amazing things. But like, yes, it will be, it'll be back to business as usual after that. And then for other things like our business improvement district, it's seeding something that is going to be built to last. And so I don't know if people can imagine a project that, we have a mechanism for sustainability afterwards. So we know that we're going to use this to seed it, but our, philanthropy team is committing to putting it in its fundraising plan, or we know that we have another funding pot we can tap for that thing after the year is over. So it really is thinking about projects that you can either sustain or work that you have that can be taken up a notch, knowing that if it goes down, it's not going to, damage your relationship with your partners.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Gia. And so, and again, I have some of my colleagues on the phone. So this year we're kind of flush with some extra things we can give the community. So additional faculty we can pay to train to do courses, additional funding we could give to community partners, additional students out there in the field. But for the big ideas, shifting some of this work into the community centers, I am, hiring somebody to do that. But this is a person that I've had like in my org chart to want to already bring on, and have had conversations with the chancellor, like, hey, in 3 years, you got to help me figure out like how I bring this person into my budget. And we have to have those conversations right now. And so it's thinking about this new person in line of like what the office needs overall, so that it gives me time to either, if I have to figure out additional sources of funding, like for my operating budget from the university, I can bring them in, or how do I build relationships with other community-based organizations for some of the stuff we start in the community centers? How will we be able to continue it just with like the Rutgers team that we have? So yeah, so I didn't realize that in the beginning. I didn't realize that because I was like, I don't think we're going to get this money anyway. And then we got it. And I was like, oh, okay. Like now, not only do I have to make this thing happen rather quickly, but I have to think about it from day one. How do I keep this money coming? And make it kind of clear to my team and the community that we got to really work with what we have. We got to really show some really good outcomes so that I can find money in other places to be able to sustain this. And also, I think one of the other things, Bobbie, is, thinking about where, community and civic engagement sits on your campus. It's also, it was easy for me because both our chancellor and our president believe in our engagement work. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a huge lift. So even though I sit on the leadership team, if they didn't believe in this work, I had colleagues who presented projects that didn't move forward from the campus, or who presented these projects that moved forward from the campus, but not the president. So you also have to kind of be honest about where your work sits in your university and how do you build these relationships, if it's not a priority, to get it to be a priority so that you can be allowed to submit for this. So that just worked in our favor, that both the chancellor and the president believe in engagement work for Rutgers. So they've been willing each time we've been asked to kind of put engagement projects up.
Yeah, and so I just want to also really lean into the point that both Gia and Nyeema, they're institutions and have been at this for a while. And I think like two really key points. One is that this is about really community-centric work. So I saw John ask the question of, I'm interested in a campus community civic learning and civic readiness project. Not saying no. I think that's a harder sell, to be honest, than what we're really highlighting here, which is that, and that's part of like, John, I think this series, and hopefully, there's multiple ways to look at external resources. Really the sweet spot for earmarks is back to that concept that Bill talked about of infrastructure being kind of top dog, that really it is kind of that boots on the ground. How can we get some resources out very short term that we can see translated? historically, community engagement has not been a big player in this space. I mean, it's part of what was so exciting about both of these projects and what I think at Compact we really want to elevate. But I think an important note is for many people here is that we need to start work now for that. So it's really about a place-based mission. Both Loyola and Camden have a lot of clarity around these are the neighborhoods and communities that we have a real stake in. Because the other thing that you have to note about earmarks is that, as Bill said, any nonprofit can go for these. So you have to have the support of your community partners, because Loyola getting that at York Road Initiative meant that another nonprofit that serves the York Road Initiative wasn't getting those resources, and the same for Rutgers. So there is a lot of work that has to go into the, typical stuff we talk about in the field of building real trust, really feeling like there's a collective impact, understanding the participatory model so that those nonprofit partners feel like they're also winning by Camden getting these dollars. And so I think that's a really important message. But I would say for those that are here and are, and how we're thinking about rolling out all of these learnings is that this can be a key part of your broader strategy. And I think that's hopefully what comes across here, that like, as you think about how do I really move my work from where it is today forward, these earmarks and these projects can be transformational. Because I want to end with my suspicion, Gia already mentioned this, but Nyeema, I don't know if you can talk to it, but these can also be triggers for bigger dollars that can come philanthropically, right? Like people want to see an investment, and a federal investment can really do that. So maybe you could speak to that, Nyeema, then let's just do a closing word from all three of you of just kind of something you want to make sure you end with that could be a lesson learned or just something you want people to take away with. So we can go Nyeema, Gia, and then Bill.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking to our advancement colleagues, our foundation about now. I don't know if I would have been able to get $1.4 million to move our work into a community center from a foundation. But now that I have it, I can take this to a rather large foundation and say, like, look, we've been doing this work. We've now gotten the state and these federal dollars to kind of invest in it. We have some time to build a relationship so that you can see some impact, and hopefully you can help me support it moving forward. That definitely is a part of our sustainability plan. It's something that the chancellor has already started to like tee up to people. Maybe not the whole thing, but pieces of it. Like you also have to think about like, how do you break this down into like sellable bite sizes to kind of take to somebody else. But let's just start, it's possible. Just have your project ideas ready, have your partners lined up, because as quickly as you're doing it, you need that letter of support from them, and you need to know they're going to give it to you and that they're going to be supportive. So think about the ideas, have the projects lined up, have the partners ready.
And I would say if you're a traditional service learning office, so you're more student and faculty facing, make connections with your government affairs team, make connections with your neighborhood affairs team. So our office is interesting in that we do kind of neighborhood, what would normally be in a neighborhood affairs unit, but also we have like a service learning, kind of the traditional kind of student faculty facing work. So, those kind of impactful community side things that your electeds would be interested in, your neighborhood affairs folks may have ideas if you don't have that as part of your structure. Because they're working with associations, they'll know what those kind of needs are. So if your center wants to stretch and partner with your neighborhood affairs unit, and your government affairs team will be essential for making the relationships with the electeds. And some campuses, it's also your office of like sponsored projects or special, on our campus it's called Office of Special Projects. It's all the people that deal with federal grants. So in our case, they make us manage it. So like I can't get a special project for it. But for other federal grants in our campus, that office will be the ones that will hold the money and disperse on your behalf. And so on some campuses, it's a tag team between government affairs and your special projects folks for those federal grants. So it's just a matter of finding out, who's the lead and who you need to talk to.
Yeah.
Two very quick final thoughts. One is members of Congress love to hear that their colleges or universities are engaging in the community. They welcome that. It destroys the ivory tower on the hill vision that many people have. So it's a terrific argument to start with. Second, don't be shy. You are handing the member of Congress a win. They love to go to their district and, get a photo op of the new community center or the, cleaned up corner that you just have. So don't be shy about asking.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Just two closing comments. One is, Session 5, before we wrap up this first version, is going to be around corporate sponsors and how we can think differently about corporate engagement to advance the work. I have a couple of great institutions that have already contacted me that I think are going to be really interesting to showcase. But if you're on this call or you know an institution that's doing really interesting work, particularly in the corporate engagement, corporate foundation space, reach out to me and let me know. And I also want to note that Bill is here because Compact has benefited from working with Washington Navigators this year. And we are really committed to thinking about how we provide better and more open and accessible pathways for all of our members to think about engaging at the federal level in collaboration, of course, with their institutional partners. So we're more to come, but thanks for being here. We'll share the recording and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.